The gunshot ripped through the night. Mitchell Ford's eyes snapped open, his hand already closing around the cold steel of his Colt single-action army before his mind fully registered the sound. 16 years of survival instinct didn't die easy. The abandoned Apache shelter was pitch black save for dying embers that cast long shadows across dirt walls. Mitchell didn't move, didn't breathe. He listened. Another shot. Closer this time, maybe half a mile out. Movement flickered in the corner of the shelter. Mitchell spun, hammer cocked in one fluid motion. His eyes locked with hers, fierce, determined, a blade already extended toward his throat. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. The Apache woman's chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, her knife unwavering in the dim light. Mitchell could drop her before she reached him, but something in those eyes gave him pause. "I ain't looking for trouble," Mitchell said, voice like gravel from disuse. The scar that ran from his forehead through his right eyebrow to his cheekbone pulled tight as he squinted in the low light. The woman didn't lower her blade. Her deerskin dress was travel-worn but well-crafted, adorned with shell beads and intricate stitching. A small leather pouch hung at her side, her fingers protectively hovering near it even as she held the knife. "Army come," she finally said in halting English. "You army?" Mitchell slowly uncocked his revolver, though he didn't holster it. Not for a long time. Outside, horses approached. Mitchell moved to the entrance, careful to stay in shadow. 5 riders, military formation. Springfield rifles gleamed in moonlight. Their leader, a lieutenant with a cruel mouth and dead eyes, signaled a halt with a raised fist. Mitchell's gut tightened. He knew the type. Men who wore the uniform but dishonored everything it stood for. "They hunt me," the woman whispered behind him. Mitchell glanced back. In the silver of moonlight cutting through the entrance, he saw the bruise along her jawline, the cut at her temple. Fresh wounds. His eyes fell to the dirt floor where spent .45-70 cartridges lay scattered. Military-issue ammunition. The situation crystallized with cold clarity. "Eagle Feather," she said, tapping her chest. "Daughter of Chief Black Hawk." Before Mitchell could respond, the lieutenant's voice carried through the night. "Fan out! Find the squaw! Colonel Sherman wants her alive." The name hit Mitchell like a physical blow. Colonel William Sherman, the butcher of Virginia, the traitor who'd sacrificed half their company at Gettysburg for his own glory. The coward Mitchell had sworn to kill if their paths ever crossed again. "Sherman?" Mitchell's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "William Sherman is here?" Eagle Feather nodded once, eyes narrowing. "He'd take my father, take men of tribe, torture for weapons." The pieces fell together in Mitchell's mind. A rogue officer, Apache prisoners, a hunt for weapons. History repeating itself with different players but the same bloody script. And now Sherman, the man whose betrayal had haunted Mitchell's dreams for 16 years. "Why's he after you specifically?" Mitchell asked, checking the loads in his Colt. "I know where sacred weapons hidden. Father and I only ones who know." She straightened her spine, dignity evident despite her circumstances. "I'd die before I tell." Outside, boots crunched on gravel. A soldier neared the shelter entrance. Decision time. Mitchell had spent years drifting, taking odd jobs, hunting bounties when necessary, all while nursing the hollow ache of loss. His wife and son taken by fever in Nebraska, his honor stolen by Sherman's betrayal. He'd been a ghost for so long, he'd forgotten what it meant to stand for something. "Back corner, now," Mitchell whispered, motioning Eagle Feather behind him. The shelter entrance darkened as a soldier stepped through, rifle leading. Mitchell moved with the silent efficiency of a predator. One hand clamped over the soldier's mouth, while the other drove his hunting knife between the man's ribs. A clean kill, minimal sound. The soldier's eyes widened in shock before dimming forever. 3 more soldiers entered in quick succession. The first died with Mitchell's knife in his throat. The second managed a strangled shout before Mitchell's Colt roared twice in the confined space, the thunder of gunshots momentarily deafening. The third soldier turned to flee but collapsed as Eagle Feather's blade found his spine with deadly precision. "Lieutenant Jackson!" came a shout from outside. "They're in the shelter!" Mitchell grabbed his Winchester 73 from his gear and positioned himself at the entrance. The lieutenant had taken cover behind a boulder 30 yards out, revolver drawn. Two more soldiers flanked him, rifles aimed. "You've got 10 seconds to surrender the squaw," Jackson shouted, "or we burn you both out." Mitchell's response was a single shot that shattered rock inches from Jackson's head, forcing him to duck. "That was a warning," Mitchell called. "Next one's between your eyes." "You're dead, mister," Jackson snarled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I do," Mitchell replied coolly. "Tell Colonel Sherman that Captain Mitchell Ford sends his regards. Tell him I haven't forgotten Gettysburg." The name landed like a physical blow. Mitchell could see the lieutenant's posture change even at this distance. "Ford?" Jackson's voice carried a note of uncertainty now. "The sharpshooter?" "One and the same." Mitchell leveled the Winchester. "Now back off before I add to my count." A tense silence stretched for 10 heartbeats. Then with a curse, Jackson signaled retreat. The soldiers mounted and rode off, dust swirling in their wake. Mitchell knew they'd be back, with more men, more guns. They had maybe an hour at most. Eagle Feather stepped beside him, watching the riders disappear. "Why you help?" Mitchell's face hardened as old memories resurfaced. "Sherman and I have unfinished business. He left me and my men to die at Gettysburg, sacrifices for a promotion. I'm the only one who survived." His hand unconsciously touched the scar that bisected his right eye. "And I'm guessing he's up to his old tricks. He captured my father. Torture him." Her voice remained steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "He seek weapons hidden in sacred cave. Ancient weapons and fire powder that could destroy many villages." Mitchell nodded grimly. "How many men with him?" 20, maybe 30. Camped 10 miles north. Many rifles. "And your father?" "Alive when I escaped. 3 days ago." She touched the pouch at her side. "I have this. Sacred stone. Key to weapons chamber. Without it, Sherman cannot enter cave." Mitchell considered their options, few as they were. A direct assault on Sherman's camp would be suicide. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. Not if Sherman was involved. "We need to move," he said finally. "They'll be back with the reinforcements. I know these mountains. There's a ravine 2 hours west where we can regroup." Eagle Feather studied him, suspicion still evident in her gaze. "Why you help me? What you want?" Mitchell checked his ammunition, his mind already mapping escape routes. "I want Sherman. You want your father. Seems we have aligned interests." He met her eyes directly. "I'll help you free your father and stop Sherman. After that, you lead me to safety beyond Apache territory." She weighed his offer, then nodded once. Agreement sealed without unnecessary words. As they gathered supplies, Mitchell felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. The emptiness that had followed him since burying his wife and son in Nebraska still ached. But now it shared space with something else. Determination. Maybe even hope. They slipped into the night just as dawn threatened the eastern horizon. Two unlikely allies bound by circumstance and a common enemy. Behind them the shelter stood empty, save for the 4 bodies that would soon tell Sherman exactly who had joined his hunt. The game had changed. The hunter would become the hunted. Dawn broke harsh over the Badlands as Mitchell and Eagle Feather pushed westward through narrow ravines. Heat rose in visible waves from sun-baked rock, distorting the horizon like a fever dream. Mitchell moved with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to hostile territory, each step deliberate, eyes constantly scanning for danger. The Winchester rested easily across his forearm, ready to swing into action at the first sign of trouble. Eagle Feather matched his pace, her moccasins finding purchase on treacherous slopes where boots would slide. Neither spoke unless necessary. Words were luxury out here, where sound carried for miles across the empty landscape. By midday, they reached a sheltered overhang where a trickle of water seeped from rock face. Mitchell surveyed their back trail through his brass telescope, a veteran's habit that had kept him alive for years. Clear for now, he muttered, collapsing the scope. But they'll have our trail by nightfall. Jackson's a cruel bastard, but he knows his tracking. Eagle Feather knelt by the seep, filling a canteen. You know him? This Jackson. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Know of him. Sherman's attack dog. Earned his commission hunting Comanche in Texas. They say he took 40 scalps in one summer. And Sherman? Tell me of him. Mitchell settled against the rock wall, checking his Colt methodically as he spoke. Colonel William Sherman, West Point graduate, decorated officer, hero of the Republic, according to the papers. Bitterness edged his voice. In reality, a butcher who climbs on the bodies of his own men. His mind drifted back 16 years to the blood-soaked fields of Gettysburg, the air thick with gunpowder and the copper stench of death. Sherman had ordered their company to hold an indefensible position while he retreated to safety. 48 men entered that battle. Only Mitchell walked out, carrying a bullet in his shoulder and a scar that would forever mark his face. We were the sacrifice, Mitchell continued, his voice distant. A diversion while Sherman secured his own glory elsewhere on the battlefield. He reported us all dead. Imagine his surprise when I showed up at headquarters a week later. He fell silent, the memory of that confrontation still raw. Sherman had him arrested, charged with desertion. Only the intervention of a sympathetic general had saved Mitchell from the firing squad. By then, Sherman had already received his promotion and transfer west. He is man without honor, Eagle Feather stated simply. Yes, Mitchell agreed. A man without honor. They rested briefly before continuing westward. The terrain grew more rugged, with narrow passes that could become deadly traps if discovered. Mitchell chose their route carefully, balancing speed against security. Late afternoon brought them to a plateau overlooking a vast expanse of desert. In the distance, perhaps 5 miles north, a thin column of smoke rose against the cloudless sky. Sherman's camp. Mitchell studied it through his telescope, noting the position and arrangement of tents, the patrol patterns of sentries. Too many men for direct attack, he observed. We need a different approach. A sound, subtle but distinct, made him freeze. The soft displacement of gravel 30 yards back. Someone had followed them up the trail. Mitchell signaled silence to Eagle Feather, then moved in a half-crouch toward a boulder cluster, Colt drawn. The attack came without warning. A figure lunged from behind the rocks. An Apache warrior, bloodied but fierce, knife slashing toward Mitchell's throat. Mitchell twisted, the blade missing his jugular by inches. They grappled briefly before Eagle Feather's voice cut through the struggle. "Brother, stop!" The warrior hesitated, giving Mitchell the opening to throw him off. Eagle Feather rushed forward, speaking rapidly in Apache. The warrior, Running Wolf, she explained, was her brother, escaped from Sherman's camp. Running Wolf sat heavily against a boulder, clutching his side where blood seeped through crude bandages. His face was a mask of pain and exhaustion, but his eyes remained alert, suspicious of Mitchell. He says Sherman tortures our father, Eagle Feather translated, wants location of sacred cave. Father refuses to speak but cannot endure much longer. Running Wolf continued speaking, his voice weak but urgent. Eagle Feather's expression darkened as she listened. Sherman has joined with Rattlesnake Rodriguez and his men, she reported. 20 bandits, heavily armed. They prepare to move camp tomorrow. Will kill prisoners if cave not found. Rodriguez? Mitchell frowned. The border raider? Governments had a $5,000 bounty on him for years. Running Wolf nodded, then spoke again, gesturing emphatically despite his wounds. He says Sherman trades weapons to bandits, Eagle Feather translated. Plans to blame Apache for raids on settlements, start war. With war as cover, can take all Apache land, find more sacred caves with ancient treasures. Mitchell's expression hardened. The scheme was brutally simple and effective. A false flag operation to trigger widespread conflict, with Sherman positioned to emerge as the hero while securing whatever treasures these caves contained. Classic Sherman tactics, sacrificing others for personal gain. We have 3 days before Father dies, Eagle Feather concluded. Maybe less. Running Wolf pulled something from his tunic, a folded paper, blood-stained but intact, a rough map of Sherman's camp with guard positions marked. He'd risked his life to bring this intelligence. Mitchell studied the map while Eagle Feather tended her brother's wounds. The camp's layout confirmed his worst fears. A frontal assault would be suicide. But the map revealed something else. The prisoners were held in a ravine east of the main camp, guarded by only 6 men, a smaller target, potentially vulnerable. We might have a chance, Mitchell mused, formulating a plan, but we'll need a distraction. As they discussed options, Running Wolf's breathing grew increasingly labored. By nightfall, despite Eagle Feather's best efforts, infection had taken hold. He died as the first stars appeared, his final words a whispered plea to save their father. They buried him beneath a cairn of stones, Apache tradition observed even in haste. Eagle Feather sang a brief death song, her voice carrying across the empty landscape like a promise. Mitchell stood silent vigil, hat in hand, respect for a warrior who died trying to save his people. No sooner had they completed the burial than distant hoofbeats echoed through the gathering darkness. Mitchell's experienced ear counted at least 3 riders, moving fast. Bounty hunters, he muttered, recognizing the irregular pattern distinct from military precision. Jackson's hired help. They took cover among the rocks as 3 riders approached their position. Rough-looking men, heavily armed, with the hungry look of predators on a blood trail. Mitchell recognized the type. Men who killed for money and enjoyed the work. The lead rider dismounted, examining sign on the ground. Track split here, he called to his companions. Man and woman heading west. Another came from the north, probably injured. Sherman's offering $500 for the woman, another replied. Extra if she's unharmed. His laughter suggested he had other plans. Mitchell's finger tightened on the trigger of his Winchester. These men represented everything he despised. No code, no honor, just greed and cruelty. He aligned the sights on the leader's chest. The shot echoed across the plateau like thunder. The lead bounty hunter dropped without a sound. A neat hole punched through his heart. The second man barely had time to register surprise before Mitchell's second shot took him in the throat. The third bounty hunter was quicker, diving behind a boulder as he drew his revolver. He fired blindly in Mitchell's direction, bullets whining off stone. "You're dead, mister," he shouted. "Don't know who you are, but Jackson's got 15 more like me coming." Mitchell didn't waste breath on replies. He circled silently through the rocks, using shadows and experience to approach undetected. The bounty hunter kept shouting threats, his voice increasingly desperate as silence answered him. The end came quickly. Mitchell's hunting knife across the throat, efficient and final. As the man collapsed, gurgling his last breath, Mitchell searched him. A folded paper in his vest pocket confirmed Mitchell's suspicions. A bounty notice with Eagle Feather's description and a map to Sherman's camp. "We need to move," Mitchell said, returning to where Eagle Feather waited. "They'll have heard the shots." She nodded, already gathering their meager supplies. "Where?" Mitchell considered the terrain, weighing options. "There's an abandoned line shack 10 miles southwest. We can rest there, Prepare for tomorrow. As they traveled through the night, guided by stars and Mitchell's unerring sense of direction, Eagle Feather studied her unlikely ally. This weathered white man with the haunted eyes and deadly hands was an enigma, part predator, part protector. She'd been raised to fear and fight his kind, yet here they were, bound by circumstance and a common enemy. "Why you not have wife family?" she asked during a brief rest. "Man of your strength usually does." Mitchell's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. An old pain, never fully healed. "Had them once," he said shortly. "Fever took them. Nebraska. Winter of '65. She absorbed this information silently. Loss was something she understood all too well. "What were their names?" she asked, offering the gift of remembrance. Mitchell stared into the distance. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "Mary," he finally said, "and little Thomas. He was 6. His voice held steady, but his knuckles whitened on the stock of his Winchester. Eagle Feather nodded once, acknowledging both his loss and his strength in enduring it. "They walk with you still," she said. "In the shadow world. They give you strength." Mitchell didn't respond, but something in his posture eased slightly. They continued their journey in silence, each carrying their dead with dignity. The line shack appeared just before dawn, a crude wooden structure nestled against a cliff face, long abandoned by whatever mining operation had built it. Mitchell cleared it efficiently, checking for signs of recent occupation or danger. Satisfied, he set about securing their temporary refuge, while Eagle Feather gathered what food she could from the sparse landscape. Later, as they shared a meager meal of jerky and wild tubers, Mitchell cleaned his Remington rolling block rifle, a specialized weapon with a scope, designed for precision at extreme ranges. His hands moved with practiced familiarity, each component inspected, cleaned, and oiled. "Tomorrow," he said, eyes on his work, "I'll teach you to use this." He nodded toward his Colt revolver. "Might need every gun we can bring." She watched him work, understanding the underlying message. Their chances against Sherman's forces were slim at best. Having her armed improved those odds marginally. "I learned quick," she replied simply. As night fell, they finalized their plan. Using Running Wolf's map and Mitchell's military experience, they identified their approach, the timing, and their best escape route. It was a desperate gamble, but neither mentioned the odds. Some truths didn't need voicing. In the darkness of the shack, with only starlight filtering through the single dirty window, Eagle Feather noticed something she hadn't seen before. Mitchell's hand occasionally moved to his shirt pocket, touching something hidden there. "What you carry?" she asked. "Medicine? Talisman?" Mitchell hesitated, then slowly withdrew a tarnished locket from his pocket. He clicked it open, revealing a small daguerreotype of a woman and child. Faces nearly faded with time and handling. "All I have left," he said quietly. Eagle Feather nodded in understanding, then reached for her own pouch. From it, she withdrew a small, intricately carved stone, smooth and dark, etched with symbols Mitchell didn't recognize. "Key to sacred cave," she explained. "And all I have left of my people's ways." They sat in silence then, each holding their past in their hands while contemplating a future that might end with tomorrow's sun. Outside, coyotes called to the moon, their voices echoing across the empty landscape. Nature's reminder that life and death continued their eternal dance, indifferent to human concerns. Dawn would bring blood. But tonight, in this brief respite, 2 wounded souls found momentary peace and shared understanding. First light painted the eastern sky blood red as Mitchell positioned himself on the ridge above Sherman's camp. The Remington rolling block rifle rested perfectly balanced against a flat stone, its scope revealing details invisible to the naked eye. From this vantage, Mitchell could see the entire operation, The main camp with its orderly military tents, the separate cluster where Rodriguez's bandits lounged, and the ravine where Apache prisoners sat bound and guarded. Through the scope, he found Black Hawk immediately. The chief sat straight back despite obvious signs of torture. His face bore fresh bruises and one arm hung at an unnatural angle. Yet dignity radiated from him, unbroken by suffering. Mitchell shifted his gaze, methodically cataloging guard positions, weapons, and potential obstacles. There, entering the command tent, was Sherman himself. 16 years older, but unmistakable. The same arrogant posture, the same calculated movements. Mitchell's finger twitched involuntarily against the trigger. At this range, with this rifle, he could end it now with a single shot. Justice, served cold after 16 years. But that wasn't the plan. A dead Sherman might satisfy Mitchell's personal vendetta, but it wouldn't save the Apache prisoners. And Mitchell had given his word. He forced his attention back to the task at hand. Eagle Feather had already worked her way to the eastern perimeter, carrying the materials they'd prepared through the night. Bundles of dried brush soaked in coal oil from the abandoned mine shaft, along with Mitchell's spare powder and percussion caps. She would create the diversion that would draw guards away from the prisoners. The morning dragged with agonizing slowness as they waited for the optimal moment. Sherman emerged twice more from his tent, conferring with Lieutenant Jackson and a Mexican man Mitchell presumed was Rodriguez. The camp operated with military efficiency, changing guards, exercising horses, preparing equipment. They were indeed preparing to move. Midday approached. The heat intensified, causing guards to seek shade and relief from their posts. Mitchell watched as one sentry abandoned his position to grab water from a nearby barrel. The discipline was slipping, exactly what they needed. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the eastern edge of the camp. Eagle Feather signal. Mitchell took a deep breath, centered himself, and squeezed the Remington's trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the valley as the water barrel exploded, showering the nearest tents. Before the guards could react, Mitchell's second shot struck an ammunition box, triggering a series of smaller explosions. Confusion erupted below. Simultaneously, flames erupted on the eastern perimeter, where Eagle Feather had placed her bundles. Fire spread rapidly through dry brush, threatening to engulf the entire camp. Men rushed to contain it, shouting contradictory orders. Perfect chaos. Mitchell fired 3 more strategic shots, taking out the guard post overlooking the prisoner ravine, disabling the corral gate where horses were kept, and finally placing a round just inches from Sherman himself, driving him into cover. With most of the camp's attention diverted to the fire and mysterious sniper, Eagle Feather slipped into the ravine where prisoners were held. Mitchell covered her approach, dropping 2 guards who spotted her movement. Through his scope, Mitchell watched her free her father and the other Apache men. Black Hawk seemed barely able to stand, but 2 stronger warriors supported him as the group retreated toward the southern escape route they'd planned. "Riders! East Ridge!" came a shout from below. Mitchell swung his rifle toward the new threat. 3 men on horseback, Jackson and 2 soldiers, had spotted the escaping prisoners and were moving to intercept. Mitchell's shot unseated one soldier, but Jackson and the other continued their pursuit. No time for another shot. Mitchell abandoned his position, sliding down a scree slope toward where he'd left his horse tethered. He mounted in one fluid motion and spurred the animal toward the confrontation, Winchester now in hand. Jackson and his remaining man had cut off the Apache escape route. The lieutenant had dismounted and was advancing on Eagle Feather and Black Hawk, revolver drawn. The other prisoners had scattered into the rocks. "Nowhere to run now, squaw," Jackson sneered. "Sherman wants a word about that cave of yours." Mitchell approached from behind, horse moving silently over the soft ground. 20 yards, 15, 10. "Jackson!" Mitchell called. The lieutenant spun, eyes widening as he recognized the scarred face behind the Winchester's barrel. He tried to bring his revolver to bear, but Mitchell was faster. The Winchester roared twice. Jackson staggered, looking down in disbelief at the spreading red stain across his chest before collapsing. The remaining soldier threw down his weapon, hands raised in surrender. Mitchell nodded toward the distant hills. "Start walking. Don't look back." The man needed no further encouragement, disappearing quickly into the brush. Mitchell dismounted beside Eagle Feather, who cradled her father's head. Black Hawk's breathing was labored, his eyes unfocused. The torture had taken a severe toll. "He needs shelter medicine," she said urgently. Mitchell nodded, already helping transfer the injured chief to his horse. "The line shack. We can—" Gunfire erupted from the ridge above. Heavy, concentrated. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Mitchell pushed Eagle Feather behind a boulder, drawing his Colt. "Well, well, Captain Mitchell Ford, back from the dead." The voice froze Mitchell's blood. Sherman stood 30 yards away, flanked by Rodriguez and 4 of his bandits, all armed, all with clear shots. 16 years I've wondered if you were still out there," Sherman continued, approaching with the confidence of a man holding all advantages. "The ghost of my past mistake. I should have confirmed your body at Gettysburg." Mitchell's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, odds. 5 armed men against his 6 remaining bullets. Black Hawk, immobile. Eagle Feather with only a knife. "It wasn't a mistake, Sherman," Mitchell replied, playing for time. "It was deliberate sacrifice. 47 men dead so you could wear those colonel's eagles." Sherman shrugged, stopping 15 yards away. "War requires sacrifice, Captain. Something you never understood." His eyes shifted to Eagle Feather and Black Hawk. "Now, about that cave and its contents. You mean the weapons you'll sell to start your private war?" Mitchell's voice dripped contempt. "The war that makes you general, maybe governor afterward?" A flicker of surprise crossed Sherman's face before his mask of control returned. "Politics was always beneath you, Ford. This is about legacy, about claiming what history owes men like me." "You're a traitor to your uniform," Mitchell spat. "Always were." Sherman's expression hardened. "Enough reminiscing. The cave location. Now." He nodded to Rodriguez, who leveled his shotgun at Black Hawk's head. "Or the chief dies first, then his daughter, then you. Slowly." Mitchell saw Eagle Feather tense beside him, her hand moving imperceptibly toward her father. Black Hawk's eyes had cleared somewhat, and he gave her the slightest nod. Some silent communication passed between them. "The sacred stone," Eagle Feather said suddenly. "I have it here." She reached slowly for her pouch. Sherman smiled coldly. "Wise decision, girl." As Eagle Feather withdrew the carved stone, her other hand slipped something to Black Hawk. Mitchell's hunting knife, concealed during the exchange. In the same motion, she hurled the stone toward Sherman's feet. The distraction worked. As all eyes followed the stone's arc, Black Hawk lunged forward with unexpected strength, bearing the knife in Rodriguez's thigh. The bandit screamed, his shotgun discharging harmlessly into the air. Mitchell seized the moment, firing rapidly. 2 bandits fell immediately. Sherman dove for cover behind a boulder, returning fire with his service revolver. The remaining bandit grabbed the fallen stone and retreated, shooting wildly as he fled. Eagle Feather dragged her father back behind their boulder as bullets whined off stone. Mitchell reloaded his Colt, acutely aware they were pinned down with limited ammunition and an injured man. "Eagle Feather," Black Hawk whispered urgently in Apache. "The cave cannot fall to them." She nodded grimly, understanding his meaning. The sacred weapons cache contained not only ancient arms, but explosive powders preserved from a time before memory. If Sherman obtained them, Black Hawk continued, his voice weakening, the stone is not the only key. The blood of our line opens the inner chamber. My blood, your blood. He pressed something into her hand, a small leather packet Mitchell hadn't noticed before. This will destroy everything. It must be done. Mitchell, though not understanding their words, recognized the gravity of their exchange. We need to move, he said, checking his ammunition. Sherman's calling in reinforcements. I can hear them coming. Eagle Feather met his eyes. We must go to cave. Now. Stop them forever. A bullet struck inches from Mitchell's head, showering him with stone fragments. Sherman was working his way closer, using cover expertly. Captain Ford, Sherman called. You're outmaneuvered again. Surrender the Apache and I'll grant you a soldier's death. Mitchell's response was another shot that forced Sherman back into cover. Then, in a whispered conference with Eagle Feather, they formed a desperate plan. Using the last of Mitchell's ammunition to provide covering fire, they retreated in stages toward a narrow ravine leading west. Mitchell carried Black Hawk across his shoulders in a fireman's carry, the wounded chief drifting in and out of consciousness. Eagle Feather moved ahead, finding the path of least resistance. Behind them, Sherman rallied his men. The pursuit was relentless, but Mitchell's knowledge of terrain and Eagle Feather's native skill kept them just ahead of capture. By sunset, they reached the base of a sheer cliff face where a narrow opening was barely visible behind scrub brush. The sacred cave, Eagle Feather said, supporting her father as they entered the hidden passage. The tunnel twisted downward into darkness before opening into a vast chamber illuminated by shafts of fading sunlight from hidden openings above. Ancient pictographs covered the walls, hunting scenes, battle images, and symbols Mitchell couldn't decipher. At the chamber's center stood a stone altar, and beyond it, a sealed doorway carved with intricate designs. Black Hawk gestured weakly toward the door. The weapons chamber, sealed by my ancestors. His voice was fading, life ebbing from wounds too severe and too long untreated. Sherman cannot have them. Eagle Feather placed the carved stone into a depression beside the door, then drew her knife across her palm. Blood welled, which she pressed against the stone. Nothing happened. Father, she said urgently, your blood too. The line unbroken. With Mitchell's help, Black Hawk pressed his wounded hand against the stone beside his daughter's. A grinding sound echoed through the chamber as ancient mechanisms awakened. The stone door began to slide open, revealing a second chamber beyond. The package, Black Hawk whispered. The yellow powder. It will collapse everything. Outside, voices echoed down the tunnel. Sherman and his remaining men had found the entrance. Time had run out. Mitchell helped Eagle Feather carry her father behind the altar as the first shots echoed through the chamber. Sherman appeared at the tunnel entrance, Rodriguez limping behind him with the remaining bandit. All were armed, all desperate. Magnificent, Sherman breathed, seeing the opening door in the chamber beyond where metal gleamed in the dim light. Worth every life sacrificed. Mitchell stood, empty Colt still in hand. It ends here, Sherman, the colonel laughed. Indeed it does, Captain. For you. He raised his revolver. Eagle Feather moved with lightning speed, hurling her knife. It struck the bandit in the chest, dropping him instantly. Rodriguez fired his pistol in response, the shot going wide as Eagle Feather dove behind a stone column. Mitchell charged Sherman directly, dodging the first shot through sheer determination. They collided with bone-crushing force, grappling for control of Sherman's revolver. Years of hatred fueled Mitchell's strength as they crashed against the chamber wall. Sherman was no easy opponent. A vicious knee to Mitchell's ribs created separation, allowing Sherman to level his revolver point blank. Mitchell twisted as the shot rang out, the bullet grazing his shoulder instead of finding his heart. He surged forward again, driving Sherman backward toward the weapons chamber. You always were a stubborn fool, Ford, Sherman gasped, blood streaming from his split lip. Fighting for others when you should have been claiming power for yourself. That's why you'll never understand honor, Mitchell growled, landing a devastating blow to Sherman's jaw. The colonel staggered, but didn't fall. He laughed, a haunting, deranged sound. Honor? Honor doesn't build empires, Captain. Men like me do. Meanwhile, Eagle Feather engaged Rodriguez in a deadly dance around the altar. The bandit's injured legs slowed him, but his expertise with a knife made him lethal. She avoided his first two slashes, but the third opened a line of fire across her ribs. Pretty squaw, Rodriguez taunted, advancing. Sherman said I could have you when he's done with the cave. Eagle Feather's response was a swift kick that connected with his wounded thigh. Rodriguez howled, dropping to one knee. She seized the moment, grabbing a stone from the altar and bringing it down on his head with all her strength. The bandit collapsed, motionless. In the weapons chamber entrance, Mitchell and Sherman continued their life-or-death struggle. Sherman managed to fire again, the bullet shattering stone inches from Mitchell's head. Only one shot remained in the colonel's revolver. Black Hawk, summoning his last strength, had crawled to the weapons chamber door. From his packet, he withdrew a mixture of powders, which he positioned at the ancient mechanism's base. "Eagle Feather," he called. "Fire! Now!" She understood instantly. Grabbing Rodriguez's fallen pistol, she aimed at the powder pack. Her father met her eyes one last time. Pride, love, and farewell in his gaze. "Mitchell!" Eagle Feather shouted. "Away from door!" Mitchell, hearing the urgency in her voice, drove his knee into Sherman's stomach and broke free, diving toward the altar. Eagle Feather fired. The explosion was devastating in the confined space. The ancient door mechanism shattered, bringing down tons of rock that sealed the weapons chamber forever. Black Hawk disappeared beneath the collapse, his final act ensuring the sacred weapons would never fall into wrong hands. Sherman screamed in rage, firing his last shot at Mitchell. The bullet struck stone as Mitchell rolled behind the altar. Finding himself suddenly alone against two opponents, with no reinforcements and no prize to claim, Sherman made the pragmatic choice. He retreated toward the tunnel entrance. "This isn't over, Ford," he shouted back. "I'll hunt you both to the ends of the earth." Mitchell, weaponless and wounded, couldn't pursue. Eagle Feather knelt beside the rubble that entombed her father, her face a mask of grief and pride. Black Hawk had died as he had lived, protecting his people, honoring his ancestors. They remained in the chamber until certain Sherman had gone, then made their way through a secondary exit Eagle Feather knew from childhood teachings. The passage emerged miles from the main entrance, in a hidden canyon where unlikely spring grass grew beside a clear pool. Under a star-filled sky, they tended each other's wounds. Physical recovery would come with time, but some injuries went deeper. Eagle Feather had lost her father, her tribe scattered. Mitchell had faced his nemesis but gained no closure. Sherman still lived, still corrupted the uniform Mitchell had once proudly worn. "What will you do now?" Mitchell asked as dawn approached. Eagle Feather gazed toward the eastern horizon. "Find my people. Some escaped north. We will rebuild." Mitchell nodded, understanding. Every culture had its resilience, its drive to survive against overwhelming odds. "And you?" she asked. "Sherman lives." Mitchell considered the question that had defined his existence for 16 years. Vengeance had been his North Star, hatred his constant companion. But something had shifted in that cave, watching Black Hawk's final sacrifice. "There are different ways to fight men like Sherman," he said finally. "Maybe it's time I found one that builds something instead of destroying." As the sun crested the horizon, painting the landscape in gold and promise, Eagle Feather reached into her pouch and withdrew a small object. A carved bone knife handle, ancient and worn smooth by generations of hands. "My father would want you to have this," she said, offering it to Mitchell. "It is called the Way Forward, for warriors who seek a new path." Mitchell accepted the gift with appropriate reverence. No words were necessary. The gesture transcended their different worlds. 3 days later, they parted ways at the border of Apache territory. Eagle Feather would travel north to find her scattered people. Mitchell would head east, perhaps to testify against Sherman to military authorities who might listen. But before separating, they made one final discovery together. An abandoned cabin beside a clear running stream, sturdy walls still standing despite years of neglect. A place where a man could stop running, a place that might become home. "I will return when winter ends," Eagle Feather promised. "See if you have mended this broken place." Her words carried multiple meanings. Mitchell watched her ride away, the morning sun at her back. For the first time in 16 years, he removed the locket from his pocket and looked at the faded images inside without crushing pain. Mary and Thomas would always be part of him, but perhaps they weren't the only reason to continue living. He turned to the cabin, assessing what needed repair, what could be salvaged. The work would be good, purposeful, productive. As he hung his Remington on the wall and set his Colt aside, Mitchell Ford felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not happiness, not yet, but perhaps its distant cousin, possibility. The blood-stained trail that had led him across 16 years of wilderness had finally opened onto a clearing. Whatever came next, Sherman's return, Eagle Feather's promised visit, the long work of rebuilding, he would face it standing on solid ground, with honor intact and a path forward. Some boundaries once crossed transformed a man forever. Mitchell had crossed his. The warrior had found his way home.